What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the New Balance Minimus TR. Alright guys, so with this year's Minimus training shoe, New Balance went back to its roots and went with a zero drop, almost barefoot training shoe. And the reason why I say almost is because though the shoe has a very low stack height, there is still a midsole that's on the shoe. So I don't consider that a barefoot shoe, though it's kind of like an intro to barefoot shoes, or it would be a good intro to barefoot shoes if that was something that you were like looking to try out and you weren't so sure, or you wanted to like train your feet for full-on barefoot shoes. The Minimus TR I think would be a good almost barefoot shoe for you to try out. So when I first got these shoes, I absolutely hated them. The fit on these shoes is ridiculous. These things are narrow, and even though they do offer them in a wide size, they're still narrow. I tried them out in a few different sizes, had to exchange them like 3 times in order for me to just stick on one size and just go with that and just hope for the best and hope they broke in. I eventually tried out the 10.5, not wide, and I stuck with that, and thankfully I stuck with it because I ended up liking the shoes. So first off, let's talk about the construction of the Minimus TR. And there's not really a whole lot going on. I mean, the colorway that I got is a little bit loud, and I'm glad that I waited a little bit longer to pick these shoes up, because this colorway is way better to me than, or way more interesting to me than the original, like it's like a normal just black and white colorway. I think this one is really cool looking. It reminds me of like 90s cartoons, 90s, just 90s in general. So I really like that about it. The upper is like a jacquard style upper. There's not a lot of stretch to it, but it is pretty flexible and it's fairly breathable. I don't ever remember my feet getting too hot, and that's something that I noticed right away when it becomes a problem. So not an issue with these shoes. It does take a little bit to break in. That's one of the woes that I had with the shoe, is that the upper was like pretty stiff initially and it had a lot of hot spots on it. After you wear them a little bit, they do go away and the wear, like the hot spots, become minimal, but initially they will be there. They will be a little bit annoying. What I would recommend that you do is just wear these without socks. They are, like I said, like kind of a barefoot shoe. So the lining inside of the shoe is lined so that you can wear them without socks. There's no real insole. There's like turn down stitching, but there's like a little cushioning there, and then there is that midsole, so it's not a complete barefoot shoe. So it will be comfortable to wear these without socks, but you can wear them with or without after a little bit of break-in. The lacing system on these is like nothing special. It's connected into the shoe. It works fairly well. The laces work fairly well as well. They're just a flat kind of soft lace, and I never really had any issues with them becoming untied. The tongue on this shoe is kind of annoying. It's like a little flat, weird, like check shaped, almost swoosh shaped tongue, and there's some wear going on in mine on the edge of my tongue right here, so it's kind of pulling apart right there. So I don't know how that's going to hold up over time, and I haven't been too hard on these shoes. I mean, like I do grab onto the tongue when I put them on, but I don't think that that part should be wearing so soon. It's only been like 4 months, and I don't wear these that often. On the outsole, there's just a full rubber outsole, and then there is a heavier rubber in the mid part of the shoe, and that kind of acts as your midfoot shank, but it also is a rope guard so that when you do rope climbs, it catches right there, and it protects from rope abrasion in the middle of the shoe. I thought it worked pretty well. Rope climbs in these shoes felt pretty good, but like any other barefoot shoe, they're a little bit hard on your feet because there's like no midfoot protection. There's no midsole, or there's not a lot of midsole, so it does kind of pinch your foot a little bit in that middle part. Around the back of the shoe, there is a little TPU heel clip for handstand push-ups or locking yourself when you get into the rower. I didn't really notice that thing. I don't like notice those things do very much anyways. I kind of think it's just, at this point, it's kind of like a waste of material. But who knows, maybe it's my technique, but I just really never noticed that doing or giving me any kind of benefit. The Achilles area on this shoe is nice and turned out. It's very comfortable in this area. The Achilles being turned out is so that it doesn't rub on the back of your Achilles, obviously. And if you're going barefoot, that's probably going to be a good thing. When you have like crew socks on, that's probably not like something you're going to notice. But if you do want to wear these shoes barefoot, then that's going to be a godsend for you. And then at the back of the shoe, there's no real heel counter. I mean, there's a real soft one that's like embedded in the back of the shoe, and then there's some back padding areas around the ankle collar. And overall, I think the build quality of the shoe it's actually pretty good. It feels like a very well-constructed shoe. There's no cheap parts of the material. And I think overall, besides the tongue, it'll hold up just fine under normal use. When it comes to the weight of the shoe, I forgot to weigh it in a men's size 10.5, but a men's size 9 is 8 ounces, so that's a fairly lightweight training shoe. I can tell you that it's a very, very light training shoe. And like I said before, the drop on these is back to old school Minimus, and it is 0 drop, heel to toe. The stack height, I'm not quite sure what it is, but the midsole on the shoe is pretty minimal. You barely feel it there. It still feels very, very low to the ground, like it was a barefoot shoe. It just does have a little bit more cushioning. So when it comes to sizing your Minimus TRs, I eventually ended up with a 10.5. My normal training shoe size is a 10. These definitely run small. And even when I'm wearing these with or without socks, I still feel like they still do run small, and they are pretty narrow. So if you have wide feet, you're probably going to be SOL. I did try out the wide size, and I didn't find that it was any more wider than the normal with New Balance Minimus TR, except on the outside of the toe box on the big toe side. So on the medial side, I found that there was a little bit more space in that area. But on the problem side, which is the lateral side, on the lateral side of the toe box, it has a weird angle to it. So that part initially on the 10.5, rubbed against my toes, and I could feel contact there. After a little bit of break-in with a 10.5, that went away, but I did have to break these in without socks on. Now I wear them with socks, without socks, doesn't really matter, but they fit okay nowadays. But initially, they fit really, really weird in that area, and I still do think no matter what, these are going to be narrow, and if you have wide feet, these are not going to be the shoe for you. But if you have a normal shaped foot, after a little bit of break-in, these should feel okay. If you have narrow feet, you're probably going to really like these shoes. So the benefits of using minimal barefoot shoes is that they are usually very lightweight and flexible, and that is the case of the Minimus TRs. These are very lightweight and flexible shoes, and that's what I really like about them. They're good for plyometric movements. The stack height in these is very, very low, so response is excellent when you're doing any kind of like plyometric movements. The flexibility is very good on these shoes as well. The toe box flexes with your foot. If you wanted to do barefoot running, I think, or you wanted an intro into barefoot running, I think the Minimus TRs are going to be one of the better shoes for that, because they're not so unforgiving on your foot, and they will teach you better pose running mechanics if that's something that you wanted to learn or get better at. I do think that if you are a barefoot purist, you might not like these shoes, but depending on what style of training you do, like if you're doing CrossFit, I think that these are one of the better barefoot shoes, or kind of barefoot shoes to use for CrossFit training. But if you're like looking for just like normal like plyometric work, you just wanted to feel the actual ground, then you might not care for the midsole that's in the Minimus TRs. But personally, since like the transition to barefoot training is a little bit rough on me nowadays, I actually really like training in the Minimus TRs, and I do CrossFit. I think that for pretty much all the things that I'm doing in a typical CrossFit workout, whether it's like a 400-meter run, 200-meter run, box jumps, burpees, double unders, the Minimus TRs are never that hard on my feet, and I feel like I can train in these for hours on end without being too uncomfortable. For stability, the Minimus TRs are actually a little bit better than what I would consider from like a normal barefoot shoe. And the reason for that is because there's a little bit more structure to this shoe than your typical barefoot shoes. These are still a 0 drop shoe. They're very minimal. They're very low to the ground. Excellent power delivery. Responsiveness is great on these shoes. The traction is excellent on these shoes. And The nice thing that I like about these shoes is that unlike typical barefoot shoes where there's no real ridges to the outsole and they don't really cup your foot in place, these actually do have that. So there's a pretty well-defined outsole ridge and they do hold your foot in place a little bit better. So Olympic weightlifting in these shoes is better than you're gonna find on pretty much any pure barefoot shoe. And that's what I think these excel in the most. I mean, if you're looking to use them for Olympic weightlifting shoes, these are the best barefoot minimal shoe to use for Olympic weightlifting. For powerlifting, these are also going to be very good because of that zero drop, low stack height. So deadlifts in these shoes are going to be excellent as well. You're not going to have to worry about any kind of lack of responsiveness with these shoes. If you wanted to squat in these shoes, that would be another good option. If you were doing like low bar squats, I think that these would be one of the better options for you without going with a complete barefoot shoe. And overall, I think lifting in the Minimus TRs is probably one of the strongest suits. I really still like zero drop shoes. I don't necessarily care for complete barefoot shoes anymore. So for me, this is like the best compromise between having something that has a little bit more structure and stability to it and is very low to the ground, has that zero drop midsole, and is something that I can still use for Olympic weightlifting because of the more well-defined outsole ridges and the fact that it cups your foot in place a little bit better than some of the other minimal barefoot shoe options. I've always been a big fan of New Balance's Minimus training shoes. The Minimus 40s, in my opinion, are still probably the best one that they've ever made. I still really like the Prevails from last year. The Minimus TRs are still a very good training shoe, but it just kind of depends on what you want to use them for, what your preferences are like. These are not like your standard CrossFit functional fitness training shoe. These are more of a minimal barefoot training shoe, and I think if you're coming from the Minimus the Minimus 40s and the Minimus Prevails, you're going to be a little bit shell-shocked if you try these out. So do keep that in mind that these are very different for training than those shoes were. But I think once you get past all that and you can accept the shoe as a minimal, almost barefoot training shoe, then I think the shoe is going to get a lot of fans. Now, the problem about this shoe is that there's no easy way to try it on and see what size fits you the best. And I think that's the Achilles heel, because I think a lot of people will get these, spend the 120 bucks, and then put them on and be like, this doesn't fit, and then they'll just send them right back, right? So I would say try to get these from like Roadrunner Sports. I think that might be the only place that has a return policy or that allows for returns on used shoes. But other than that, I still think that these are a pretty good training shoe that fits a little odd, and it's just not for everybody. It's a weird fitting shoe. It's narrow. And like I said, if you're coming from the other minimal or Minimus training shoes, this is going to be a shell shock for you because it's completely different than those ones are. It's more similar to the original like MT10, MT20, the minimal trail training shoes that they used to have, and less like their last couple of Minimus training shoes. But all in all, I ended up liking the Minimus TRs a lot more than I had initially thought I was gonna like them. I'll keep them around for days where I'm doing like a lot of gymnastics, a lot of plyometric movements, you know, like lighter body weight stuff. I'm not really lifting too heavy unless it's like a deadlift or a back squat or something like that, some kind of powerlifting movement. Probably not super heavy snatches or clean and jerks or anything like that. But I think all in all, once you get past all of the weird quirkiness about the shoe, it is still pretty good for a training shoe. And if you wanted to dip your toes into barefoot training, I think that this is probably the best intro to barefoot training shoe there is. So if you guys have any questions about the Minimus TR from New Balance, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.